Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. Today you got a great episode. We're going to be talking about habits. I talk about this a lot in the context of sales, but we're going to talk about it in the context of great athletes. I have a former coach of the New York Yankees on today. He wrote a book about habits of champions, and the analogies between any sport and sales is pretty close. And it's probably one of the reasons why a lot of salespeople used to be in athletics. They had to grow up in a coaching culture, a training culture, a preparation and practice culture, and that works really well into sales. Now, we then tend to forget about this after a few years. We tend to get comfortable in our skill set. We tend to assume that just because we've done it 1,000 times, the next time is going to be just as easy. But we forget that it's a preparation profession. It's not a repair profession, that we have to practice a little, take some coaching. The people who watch us are going to see stuff that we can't see ourselves, and we have to do a post-game tape on it. And to give you an example of the post-game tape, I just got access to Gong as a user, and I've loaded up all my interviews into it, and I'm going through it and analyzing my interviews, trying to become a better podcaster. And I'll also be offering this to people in the course that we can do mock sales calls so that you can get the Gong analytics and see what AI can teach you about your sales call. Or if you're in the course, you can just send me a sales call and I'll run it through Gong and show you the results and how to use it. So it's a super powerful way of getting feedback on your game. It's your game tape. Also, make sure you're checking out nudge.ai, show you how to get into any account, what they care about, who in your network has the closest relationship. Too many of us are prospecting backwards. We're going coldest to warmest. We want to go warmest to coldest. And Nudge is really the way to do it. Check it out. I also have my course that's free with the coupon code Nudge. You can get the product with the coupon code Brutal Truth. It's all in the show notes, as well as a template to send your manager to get them to pay for you being in the course. You can also schedule a time to talk over it with me by going to B2B Revenue and under training. Now, this is to talk about the course, not career advice or free consulting, only to talk about the course. And if you pick a time, please show up. It's a really good sign if you want to be a salesperson. Hey, the last thing before we get into the interview, Discover.org has got a new data set. If you sell into the legal community, which is a tough community to sell into, and they have done all the research for you to get the contact information. And if you're in one of those tough markets, see if Discover.org covers it, because instead of you spending all your time doing it, just get the product. It's really, They've done an amazing job, and they continue to do it. Let's get into the interview. I'll sum this up at the end. I think this is one of the best interviews I've done this year, not because of my interview skills, but because of the content. Because the content is so aligned with what it takes to become a great salesperson. And I'm kind of built in this stuff into a course that I'm going to call A Year to Excellence, which is going to be included in the Closing the Complex sale as part of it for the first year. So make sure you sign up before the end of the year. Also, if you work for yourself or you can deduct it, it's a great time to get it in before the end of 2018 so you can deduct the whole thing from your taxes. Here we go with the interview. Hey, Dana, thanks for joining us today as a way of getting started. Tell us about yourself.
All right, thanks for having me. So I spent my entire career as the director of strength and conditioning and performance for the New York Yankees. And, it was quite a journey. I started that when I was 19 years old. I started as an intern. And, I got a chance to see what made the greatest performers in the world. As a young man, I always thought it was just their talent. But what I realized was that there was a series of habits and a series of attitudes and a mindset that leads to long-term success and long-term winning. And I got to experience that, firsthand on the front lines. And, to start as a young man, 19 years old, I was kind of formed in that mindset and mentality, and those players had tremendous influence on my overall development as a professional, not just as a professional coach, but in the world of business, entrepreneurship, and I was taught how to win and the importance of winning at a very early age. So that's really just my initial backstory. But really, I have a degree in sports medicine and exercise science from the University of South Florida down in Tampa. I was an aspiring athlete. I wanted to end up playing first base or outfield for the New York Yankees. But
Don't we all?
unfortunately,
Yeah.
yeah, right. But
Unusual request.
yeah, I know. But I realized in my journey, I started to play baseball in college, and I realized that, my talent was not good enough to get me to the next place. My work ethic was there, my desire to learn, my ability to be coached and find coaches, that was always there. But I had to have an honest conversation with myself and realize that my career was not going to be as a player for the organization. So luckily, I was able to find the next best thing, and I became a professional coach. And I started as an intern. I started as the guy that was responsible for handing out towels and handing out water and cleaning a weight room. That's where I started, all the way at the bottom. And I'm so glad I did, because really was able to get my feet wet. I was able to get experience. I was able to fail without being judged in a negative way. And I was able to really challenge myself to step up as a young guy to, swim in the deep end of the pool when, I really felt I didn't have any business being there because I didn't have the skills, but I was going to acquire those skills. And every day I went to battle, I was able to get a little bit better and a little bit better by failing a little bit and then winning, failing and winning, failing and winning. And when you look back on that journey, those mini failures were what led you to victory after victory after victory. So that's really just how I got started. And I was again an aspiring player, a fan of the game, and I was the guy taking pictures of these players through a chain link fence with a flip phone back in about the year 2002.
Yeah.
And to a couple days later, that same field I was taking pictures of and sending pictures back to New York because I'm from New York and I was going to school in Florida. I was in the middle of that field just a couple days later with a couple breaks that I got.
And as you became the coach or the training and strengthening coach, who did you report to? Is there a hierarchy among?
Yeah, so I reported directly to the general manager of the team, Brian Cashman, whose responsibility is to hire the best talent, both in terms of coaching and in terms of player personnel. So I luckily reported directly to the top. So I always knew if I didn't get it done, I knew who was going to come and come after me.
And what did your typical day look like, during, training season and then into the actual season?
Yeah, so the days were definitely very long. Our days would start right around between 11 a.m. and 12, and we would obviously, have all our preparation work, and then our games would start at 7 o'clock at night. So what people don't realize is in a professional sports environment, your day is starting oftentimes 7 hours before game time, before the first pitch. So there's 7 hours of physical and mental preparation that takes place prior to competition. And then once the game concludes, there's another hour that goes into recovery and everything else. And then, the players leave. But, if we had a travel day, that day would start at 11 a.m. or 12 p.m. We'd play the game, we'd do our recovery afterwards, and then we may be on a flight out to Seattle, out of New York. So you're not landing until, 3, 4 in the morning. So that's the endurance component, and that's the mental fortitude that's needed in order to, survive a professional sports season. But also, don't forget, you're paid on performance. So nobody cares if you're tired. Nobody cares if you're fatigued or you're having a bad day, you're in a bad mood. And that was really a big part of my job, was working on, the physicality to endure, but the mentality as well to endure. And, it's definitely a grinder.
Yeah, and like in sales, people always talk a lot about mindset, but I think people overlook just the physical components of
Yeah.
good sleep and good nutrition and reasonable exercise.
But what people don't realize is that your physical dictates your mental.
Yeah.
Most people think it's the other way around, but I got to, after you train and work out and physically exert yourself, do you usually feel better or worse about yourself? And usually, no matter how out of shape you are, after that workout, you feel better. So we used our physical training to enhance the mental side and the mental strength of players. So they were able to directly correlate their physical training with their mental strength. And in playing a sport, especially like baseball, where it's a me versus you game, typically the player with the greater confidence and the greater self-esteem and physicality wins,
And no matter how long they've played, this is a regiment. This is a routine. It's not like learning a bicycle where it's binary. You either can ride a bike or you can't.
Yeah, yeah. And what I found, the difference between, a professional athlete and let's just say the general population is always looking for a detox, a 10-day program, a 90-day fix or something like that. And these companies have learned exactly how to market to the psychology,
Yes.
of the average individual. But, I laugh because I listen to a lot of podcasts and I read what a lot of people are writing and I laugh because I see everyone, there's all these quick fixes and they're all subscribing to it and documenting their journey of the quick fix on Instagram or social media. And you just know that doesn't work. And I always say professional athletes, the good ones, are the most regimented, type A, anal retentive people you'll ever meet. They're boring, they're vanilla, and they just stick to their routine through thick and thin, tired, not tired. It doesn't matter. The routine is where they find their own stability and confidence and security.
And routine is just another word for habits, right? It's just a
Routine,
synonym.
exactly. It's daily habits that you're executing on in order to help you yield the result that you defined that you wanted.
But the social consumer view of professional athletes is they fly into town, they head out to a bar and restaurant and then to a club, hit the hotel at around 3 a.m. Is that what it's really like? Or
Yeah, the players that don't last very long it is like that for them. But the great players, they live very stable lives and they're very adamant about getting enough sleep, making sure their meals are planned and structured, making sure their workouts are planned and structured, and making sure that their on-field, technical skill work is planned and structured. So they are. I work with a lot of CEOs and executives and team owners as well, and you see great parallels between the great players and the great CEOs and executives that they are very, very structured and very disciplined to that structure and to that process.
And that is something that I see missing a lot in sales, and that people kind of think that they've been doing it for a couple years, that they don't need to sit down and plan, strategize, that they wing it.
Yeah.
Meaning like that they just, and I use the sports analogy all the time because, everything in life is a game. Some are very structured like baseball, but even in baseball, like each field is a little different, right? Fenway Park is different than Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, the dimensions are a little bit different in terms of the wall, but everything else is pretty consistent in terms of, the bases are still 90 feet apart. The pitcher's mound is still the same distance. So that is all the same. The rules of the game are the same. And that's what's interesting about business. And you mentioned, the sales professionals, it's not about just trying to reinvent and rediscover yourself every single day. It's coming up with a set of standards and core beliefs and values that you have that make up your personal way of doing business. But what I always found is the inconsistent people in life, they do one thing on Monday, something different on Tuesday, something different on Wednesday, different on Thursday, and they never give anything a fair shot. And if what worked on Wednesday, they'll try that on Thursday. But if it doesn't work on Friday, they've already abandoned it. So it's just a complete lack of consistency. And I believe that comes from a lack of trust in the self.
It's that, and I've also seen it just be stimulus response, meaning that, I had a manager and he would do a ride along with me. And if we went into an account and the guy had blonde hair and he bought, he'd say, what we should start doing is selling to guys with blonde hair.
Yeah, exactly.
And I
Yep.
go, that's correlation, not causation.
Yeah.
And the strategy du jour. And at least with baseball, you have some kind of confinement, right?
Yeah.
There is a rule book. There are referees. But in business, it's still a game, but it's not very well defined.
It's not well defined, but what it does require is a lot of personal discipline, and discipline is definitely another one of the foundational principles, of success. And I ask people, this is something that it's meant to be a little bit of a joke, but it's really meant to get people to think. I said, listen, if I were to tell you I have to do 20 jumping jacks from today for the next 30 or the next 60 days, it's a very easy task. But how many people would be able to hit that box for 30 or 60 days and actually do it? It's very simple, but people struggle oftentimes with simple things and repetition. And that's what athletes are so good at.
Yeah, because they've done it from high school on. Anybody who makes, professional sports started at least in high school, if not earlier.
Right, exactly.
Sales is kind of one of those random professions that people fall into. I say either because they're money motivated or they can't do anything else. It's something that if you can talk and show up on time, you can probably get a chance at doing it.
Yeah, and it feeds right into, those that are competitive too. It's definitely a great career path,
And I was kind of surprised to find out that LeBron James spends $1.4 million a year on his training, his coaching, massages, his medical care. And I was like,
yeah, but you know what drives that? He understands, I call it an association. There's a direct association and correlation between his preparedness and how he plays on the court. And if he plays well on the court, he's going to get paid. So there's a direct link between preparedness, on-court play, and compensation. Direct. So he understands I'm investing $1.5 million and my time, but that $1.5 million is going to yield me 30 at the end of the year. So I wrote a blog once. I said, "Are you even spending 1% of what LeBron James pays on himself?"
Yeah.
And most people neglect themselves.
Yeah, I think we all become really comfortable that we did it last week, last month, last year. We can do it next year.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can.
And
I think, when you have sports where you really have a career of 10 to 15 years, but then you get somebody like LeBron James who's really kind of spreading that out, which obviously has huge economic impact to him. Making that investment, you would think it's obvious in hindsight, but then if you were the person, you could be arrogant and say, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, that's, that what's interesting is, a lot of athletes get labeled as, being, arrogant and so ego driven. But I got to tell you, the great ones, they're very easy to coach. They're very coachable. They turn themselves over to you and they're looking to you for guidance. Like a guy like Derek Jeter was very much like that. What do I have today? He wanted to focus on what he had to do on the field, and he surrounded himself with really good people to help on the other aspects of his game to keep it prime and to also, get a fair evaluation outside of himself.
And not let his ego get in the way.
Yeah, and that's what I laugh, because people say, "Oh man, these guys are so ego driven," and they're not. I mean, it's a lot of confidence that they have because they have to have that to play at that level. But most of them are actually pretty humble people to work with on a day-to-day basis.
And when I interview sales leaders, number one, what they want in a salesperson is always coachability, almost universally.
Yeah,
because people, when you're emotionally involved in the game, and I'm sure you've seen this in sports, and you see it all the time when the bench is empty and they fight over stupid stuff, right? Misunderstandings or accidents or temper. Something takes over, right? And it's obviously not logic.
Yeah, it's definitely sheer emotion at that point, and that brings up another good point because, the elites of the elite, they never get too high and they never get too low. That was one of the characteristic traits that I identified with the best players that I've had a chance to work with, over the years. They were never outbursts, and they were not reactive to how they performed that day because they were really good at looking at things in the macro. And so these up and downs, up and downs, up and downs, that's exhausting. That'll wear you out if you live and die by every win or loss or by every win or failure. So the best of the best, there's a level of just even keeled, even temperedness that exists within them because they know that keeps them efficient and economical as well, because your emotions can wear you down more than anything and faster than anything.
And what was the type of system that the Yankees used to keep both the mindset and the body, not just as baseball skills, but just healthy skills?
Yeah. So realistically, what we had in place was a program that was built on consistency. So what I did and what I do now is I create personalized plans because the generalized global plan doesn't really work because you're not bought into it. When you say, hey, this is my plan, it's built for me, it's custom to me and who I am and my needs, then the buy-in is typically higher. So what we do is, we would assess and evaluate every player. We determine what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and what their key areas of focus are. And then what we would do is we would design a custom and personalized plan in terms of their physicality for that particular player, always addressing what I call the elephant in the room first. So if somebody has back pain, that's the first thing you would work to correct. Wherever that elephant is that you determine, is the elephant in the room and the key inhibitor of performance. And it could be a psychological block. It could be, a physical block or pain or an injury, anything like that. But it's a customized program based on an assessment and evaluation. And then from there, it's about holding them accountable and consistent each and every day to attack that personal plan. And by doing that enough days in a row, it becomes habitual. And that's what we did a really great job of as an organization was, number one, we defined from day one what our goal was as an organization, which was to win a championship. Anything less than that was a complete failure. Getting within a game was still a failure. Getting to the playoffs was a failure. We had to win the championship. So that was clearly defined. And then what we did was we put together an individualized plan for every player so they can achieve their own personal best and personal excellence. And if you have every player achieving their own personal best and personal excellence, and you've defined that big goal, every day that we check that box, we're moving closer to that big goal.
And I hear a lot of people, and I was listening to a podcast this morning, and people kind of tend to make it think like it's one thing, like it's just grit or mindset. And this guy went out and done a 100-mile race unprepared, and he suffered the consequences, but he felt great about it afterwards, and he felt anyone could do it. And I was like, I couldn't do it, and I'm a runner.
Yeah.
And you can't convince me that it's just my mindset. It's like there's a physical element to it. Now, tell me what the ramp is on some of these things.
Well, in terms of, just kind of taking a half step back, that's why I said, when mindset is definitely a very overused term right now. I say there's a couple, words that are overused in today's world of development, and mindset is definitely one of them. I think your mindset is determined by a lot of other things that exist. So, having a strong mindset, all right, that's great. But now how do we do that? How do we get there? How do we improve our mindset? Because I'll tell you what, if you go run a mile and you're deconditioned and all of a sudden, you have some sort of a lower extremity injury that takes place or a strain of some kind, your mindset could be as strong as you want it to be. To complete another 25 miles is going to be virtually impossible, so
nor healthy.
Nor healthy. And I think that's what we have to always ask ourselves is are we moving ourselves closer or further from, just an overall well-being, because we want to be great sales professionals and we want to be great professionals in all that we do, but are we firing on all cylinders, and are we making that our number one focus? And now all of a sudden our relationships are eroding, our health is eroding, and everything else is eroding, but I hit my sales target for the month or the quarter or the year. So it's about, with an athlete, it's keeping all of those in balance, because listen, we're traveling so much that, it's important that we work and support the guys to keep their family structure strong, and we keep all of that, working at the same pace. If any one gets ahead of the other, something's falling behind. So we want to keep everything, working together.
In sales, I often hear, or I say that it's a performance profession, meaning much like baseball, it's like you're only on that field for that 2.5, 3 hour game, but the rest of the week you're preparing for that.
Yeah, I mean, your preparation is what leads to the outcomes that you desire, and that's why it's so important that you do take the time to prepare. You see, that's what I was saying earlier, is that although the general public turns on the ESPN and gets to watch the players compete for those 3 hours, well, over the course of a 7-day week, because we are actually playing oftentimes 7 days, don't forget, our preparation is 7 hours prior to that first pitch. So you're talking about, on a weekly basis, almost 50 hours of preparation before competition. So do that over the course of a 9-month season or an 8-month season, and you can see how many preparatory hours went into that 3-hour performance. So it's like, if you have the sales meeting, what did you do prior to that meeting to get yourself ready for that meeting? And, listen, in the sales profession, I work with a lot of guys on Wall Street, and private equity guys, and those meetings are worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
So you can't just show up and wing it.
Right.
If a professional athlete that's looking to earn 20, 30 million a season puts in 7 hours and 50 hours a day and 50 hours a week, what makes you think that you could just show up and get it done? It doesn't make any sense.
It's just this belief that I've been doing this for X number of years. I know what I'm doing. But yeah, you do. But
yeah,
you may not at that moment, that you have to work up to that.
And everybody's preparation is different. That's what I was saying before when it comes to creating an individualized plan. Like, somebody may have, I've always been doing it this way and I'm really good at it. But like I said, for them, it may not be actually working on the X's and O's and the strategy of what goes on during the meeting and preparing for that. It may be preparing them so their energy is where it needs to be, or their mindset is actually not eroding because their health is eroding. So it's finding, your own areas of, I don't want to say weakness, but areas that could use more development and polishing. Yeah. And that's where you're focusing your preparation as well.
And tell us about the book. What would people get out of it? Who's it for? And what was your motivation to write it?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. I never considered myself an author, but now I have a book. And, really, last year I got up one day and I said, you know what? I was reading all these books about, personal development and leadership and all these books that I thought were really generated more in a classroom and a text-based learning environment. And I said, when I read these books, what I'm reading and what I live on a day-to-day basis, again, working with the elites of the elites, it didn't match up. So here I am reading a book telling me how to be what these people I get to work with every day already are, and I saw a huge gap. So I wanted to create a book that was personal to my story, but it was personal to everybody that read it, and it was filled with simple concepts that you can use every day. You could open up the book to any page and pull value out as to how I can apply this to my day-to-day living and my day-to-day quest to become a champion in my own right. So that's what the book was about. And again, it was for athletes, coaches, and business professionals, CEOs, leaders, sales professionals, and the lessons apply across the board. And I feel like when I go and speak to a lot of organizations, they all feel that they are just like a sports team. But then when you get talking to them and you understand their culture and you actually let them know what a real sports environment is about,
Yeah,
they
very
can see how
different.
big that gap actually is. So the book is meant to open people's eyes to what our sports environment really is. And then also talking about failure openly and talking about what it takes to overcome failure and win. And that was really what the book is about.
And where would people go to connect with you,
Yeah.
follow you, and learn more about your work?
Yeah, so the book is available on Amazon. It's also available on my website, which is danacavalea.com. And I'm active on, Twitter. That's more for my sports audience, Dana Cavalea. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So I'm very available and I enjoy answering questions and helping people realign their life to their goals, and I always lead with the physical self and clean people up physically, make them feel really good about themselves, and then move them through the rest of their process.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that conversation. It's a great topic, and too many times I hear about people just trying to do it with solely mindset. It's the whole package. It starts with, how well we sleep, how well we eat, how much exercise we get, and then it builds into our mindset, and then it builds into what we do. Are we willing to take feedback? Are we asking for feedback? Are we willing to then take action? And this is really going to be my obsession in 2019. I've learned so much about salespeople in the last 5 years that I've been doing this full time. And I've learned more about sales in the last 5 years than I did probably cumulatively before that. And to really build a great salesperson, it takes really developing all of those skills, not simultaneously, but continuously. Every day, just little baby steps towards becoming the person you want to be with some consistency, not this roller coaster of beginning of the quarter, take some time off, middle of the quarter, work your butt off, end of the quarter, pull the rabbit out of the hat. That pattern doesn't really compound. And to compound, you have to really have daily habits. And people say, oh, you get a routine. Routines can become boring. They can. They honestly can. But there's no other thing. The pure willpower approach dies off so quick. The one-hit wonders and the ego that people have in sales, it just doesn't scale. So look for that course. I sign up before the end of the year to lock in all the key capabilities that I have today. It's probably going to change both pricing and offering January 1st. So lock it in today. If you have any questions about it, feel free to get on my calendar and we can talk it over. I'm really excited about adding Gong to the course and getting the output of it as a great illustration and talking point of sales conversations. Because strategy is one thing, but the conversations are really where it happens. That's the execution. That's the ball game. Planning for the game is good. Reviewing it afterwards is good, but the performance is what counts. So please check out the show notes. I've got a standard email template in there that you can show your manager. Just cut and paste that into an email, customize it to your particular company and the output that you get. I mean, really all you need is one new deal and the course pays for itself. And it's the way to really build up your skills for a year, to really dedicate 1 year to get your career to the next level. So it's at b2brevenue.com. Check out the show notes. Connect up with me on LinkedIn. I really appreciate somebody liking the comment, liking the content, commenting on it. And also check out all the partners in the show notes. Pipedrive, Co-Video, they're doing some great work there. Video, email, make that part of your 2019 strategy. Try it out. Video is just crushing it today. Gong did the research, it proved statistically that when you turn that camera on a demo or a screen share, the deal is more likely to close. It's more engaging. People aren't going to be playing with their phone while they're watching you and you're watching them. It's just the next best thing to being there. So you can do that with email as well. Appreciate you listening. And I've got some more great episodes coming up, so stay tuned as well. Make sure you're checking out the Sales Questions podcast, where I'm putting out the answers to all your favorite questions.
I love the approach. It's working for me just fantastic. If I sent you some of the emails, which I should, the conversations that I'm having with people, I think you'd be blown away because they're not really about work.
Yeah.
I've figured out if you can kind of get personal with them, like one lady, it's all about her family, kids. And then I sprinkled in a little bit around work, and she's LinkedIn, sending me messages on LinkedIn, photos of her family. No, I'm not even kidding. I should show this to you. You'd be stunned. I was shocked. And we're going to lunch on September 6th. And yesterday she shot me a LinkedIn message and said, "Hey, Ron, why don't we get on the phone and do a video call beforehand so our lunch isn't so awkward? We're like barely not meeting each other for the first time." Oh, holy cow, right? Like, this is unbelievable. So this is not the first time that this has happened. She's kind of an extreme, but I'm starting to figure out a pattern where I can actually make this a process, So
good. Yeah.
I'll show you that. So it's getting to that point. And every time I do this, I'm like, God, this is unbelievable, So.
And it feels better too, doesn't it?
Oh, Brian, let me tell you something. To be able to go to lunch with her, I'll even talk to her on the phone, right? We're going to talk about family, kids, work-life harmony, because I shared a thing with her from Bezos about work-life harmony. This is where the conversation will start. Now, at some point, we're both not stupid, right? We know we're going to talk about work. We know why we're both there.
Right.
But to kick it off this way is so much better. And to end that lunch with the last 5 to 8 minutes of telling, well, what are you guys doing with digital